Today we're going to be going over the 10th house, so take it away, Mary.
Hi guys, so the 10th house, the uppermost part of your chart, it's the highest area of life. Most people have their midheaven here. If you use whole sign house system, which I think the three of us do, could fall into the 9th or the 11th. The midheaven though is traditionally associated with the 10th house. It's an angle and angles are very personal. So the 10th house is an angular house. It's traditionally ruled by Saturn and Capricorn, and it represents seeing yourself through the eyes of others. It's the way the public sees you, your career, and the legacy that you leave on this earth even after you leave the earth. It's a very public point in your chart. It usually represents what you're known for, what you're remembered for. It can show the career, but you do have to look at the ruler of the 10th house, where it is in the chart. So let's say your 10th house is in Gemini, like mine. You have to look for Mercury, and you have to really kind of analyze aspects to Mercury and the sign on your 10th house. Also, like if you have planets there, that can say a lot about what you end up doing for work. For example, I've seen people with Uranus here either go through many different careers or work with technology, work with the internet. I've seen people with Saturn here usually either find their career later in life, or they become leaders, or they go into a position of authority. It's very telling about what you end up doing career-wise with this area of life. But it's not just the career. It can also represent your more dominant parent, usually the father. In today's society, it can be the mother. Whichever parent you experience is more authoritarian, is usually shows up in the 10th house. It's a pretty straightforward area of life.
I have Virgo on the 10th house, and I have Mars in Chiron.
Chiron here, usually it's the wound of the father, or like losing your father, or it can be attracting wounded relationships through authority figures, which we were just talking about. Usually you have some toxic bosses or people who have authority over you that can either abuse that authority, or because Chiron is where we really are the victim. I really believe that. If you have like Mars here, for example, you can become an athlete. I've seen with this one. Jupiter here, you can become a teacher, go into
military or something.
Yeah, with Mars, military. And the sign of the midheaven kind of explains how other people see you, but also what you need career-wise. So like Aries midheaven, they need to be the boss with whatever they do. They usually do best when they start their own business, but of course you have to look at Mars. Cancer here can imply being a parent or going into a career that's nurturing. Sometimes they even go into real estate because Cancer rules the home, the 4th house. Capricorn here, you have to really look at Saturn for this one, but usually you become the authority in whatever career path you choose. Actually, the 10th house works usually with the North Node. I like to analyze them both and their rulers in the chart to kind of figure out what your ideal career would be. And another thing though with the 10th house is you don't really have to do anything to be your 10th house. It's kind of like a destiny thing where you just end up either doing that career, whatever the sign is or the planet is, or that's just what you're remembered for. It also represents your reputation as well with the 10th house. So if you have malefics here, like Pluto, for example, it can imply at some point having to deal with somebody trying to tarnish your reputation. For example, with Neptune here, I see this a lot in charts of musicians, people who are in the movie industry, like actors or actresses, but usually it implies doing something creative for a living. If you have Venus here, it's so fortunate. I actually knew someone who was a Libra rising with Venus in the 10th, so it was his chart ruler, and you usually get to be in the public eye at least a few times in your life, which he was. He was like on Wheel of Fortune and on Shark Tank. He was just also really popular and lucky when it came to his career. So that's usually how Venus manifests there, especially if it's a chart ruler. You can also, in a man's chart, you can marry somebody wealthy or somebody famous. In a woman's chart, if you have Jupiter here, the same would apply as well. I've heard Jupiter doesn't really do the best in the 10th house, that it's better in the 11th house, but I mean, I don't see why it wouldn't do well in the 10th house. I feel like it would bring you luck career-wise and your reputation. The sun here, you're usually a workaholic, or you were a lot closer to one of your parents than the other. Typically, you're very ambitious and you're a go-getter in life, where you're constantly thinking about your goals and working to achieve them. Most of the time with the sun here, it implies they spend most of their time working, definitely. The North Node here is an interesting one. It usually implies you come from lifetime lifetimes where your family and your roots held you back, and there's too much enmeshment with the family, especially the mom. You're meant to make a name for yourself in this lifetime and leave a legacy. For this one in specific, it's a hard one. A lot of the charts that I read, they do not go towards that North Node, especially men for some reason. The women, lots of them are definitely embodying the North Node, but for whatever reason, the men can't break the chains of the family. They're
Or
usually
just like societal pressure, I feel like.
yeah, and it just implies somebody who was too emotional in a past life and too like enmeshed. So like you could have been, for example, a codependent housewife in a past life where you put the needs of the family before your own needs. So you never really pursued that. And you lack ambition usually when you have the North Node here. So that's very much what you're here to develop. You're here to develop ambition. When you have the South Node here, it's the complete opposite. You usually come from lifetimes of you achieved a lot in your career, you overworked, and you totally neglected your home and family life. Very often I'll see it where in this lifetime they just cannot stop working. And they usually have many issues in their career, constantly, literally a sign that you're supposed to go the opposite way, but they almost always just do the overworking thing. I know this North and South Node really well. My first husband, South Node in the 10th. Very successful, very unemotional. Definitely there's a fear of intimacy and like a fear of starting a family. Current husband, North Node in the 10th house, very much a family man, loves to be at home, is very emotional, and his career is the last thing on his priority list.
Something that I noticed and Mary noticed too, we were talking about a few months ago, that like you'll look at a man's chart and you're like, why is he so emotional? None of his placements will indicate a man who's emotional, and then we'll realize, oh, his South Node's in the 4th house.
Oh my gosh, seriously? It gives them such strong Cancer traits.
Yeah.
And he's an Aquarius, and you would never believe it. You would never believe it. He's like the most, like he cries like on a daily basis. He's probably going to kill me for saying this, but he's very emotional. And the mom, I'm not going to talk badly about my mother-in-law, but let's just say that that woman is just pure evil. She really held him back in life a lot.
Like, I'm not going to talk about her, but
she's pure evil.
That's just being nice, to be honest. And it's funny because I came into his life and I just like fucked up his entire home life, and I was like, no, you need to go. And I pretty much got rid of his mom, and to this day, like, he tells me, you made me see the truth about my mom. And I was just doing a reading for someone right before this where it was the same situation. It was a synastry reading. He had his South Node in the 4th house. The mom is 93 and still holding on for dear life, and he refuses to see it. And she's actually the mom's therapist, where she
let's talk about therapists.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she would know, I feel like. So she's like, I don't even understand how toxic the mom is, and he refuses to see it. That's the North Node in the 10th house. Or like even actually South Node conjunct Moon, usually they can immediately know the mom's like kind of toxic. The South Node in the 4th house, North Node 10th house, the family bonds are so strong and so karmic. It just goes way back. So the 10th house is, it's what we aspire for. It's an area of life that we look up to. It's literally the top of our chart. It's very common in marriage to be with someone who has planets in your 10th house. Even though it's not the most romantic house, it's still kind of like what you look up to. I married somebody whose sun fell into my 10th house, and I've dated many of them. I also have Venus in Capricorn, though, so I kind of like that, but I do see it a lot.
Going back to the other significations, I was looking in Demetra George's book. It can also relate to marriage and children, because when you're talking about, especially by transit, because you're talking about a status change. And so the 10th house is about your public status. And anytime you have some big life change like that, it's associated with that.
Very true, because I actually gave birth to my son during my 10th house perfection year, and I got married during that year as well. That makes a lot of sense.
Very common.
The house, it's like public achievement, status change, reputation, all of that. If you have an asteroid like Juno here, usually you want a spouse that makes you look good in public, or you want a spouse that is like a powerful spouse. I see that a lot too in men who marry powerful women. Her sun conjuncts their midheaven, usually, or she's a planet on their midheaven. Mars conjunct the midheavens, usually, typically, and synastry is typically pretty malefic. So is Pluto. Pluto. However, sometimes Saturn conjunct the midheaven can actually be good. It means that you bring them a sense of like seriousness when it comes to their career. So it really just depends. But midheaven conjunctions are often very common in marriage, especially ascendant conjunct midheaven in synastry. I see that one plenty of times. 10th house, for the most part, it's a fortunate area of life unless you've got some pretty hard malefics here. I knew someone who had Pluto here who fought in the military, like he went to Afghanistan. He experienced lots of trauma there. So it was very much the exact manifestation of Pluto in the 10th house, lots of death and trauma. So the 10th house, it's angular. So you're going to feel transits here a lot, especially when Saturn transits this house. You're going to get serious about your career. You can start off tough, like getting fired or something like that. But then ultimately, when Saturn finishes the transit, you usually find a solid career. If you have good karma here, so meaning if you've done things right in your career, it can bring you actually lots of success and recognition. But the same goes for vice versa.
For me, my midheaven does not fall in the 10th house. So it kind of took me like a little while to figure out what does the 10th house mean for me, because 10th house signifies legacy and career and achievements. The midheaven is always grouped in with the 10th house. So it was hard for me to wrap my head around having them in two different houses. Because people, it's not always, but people group them together.
Yeah, if you use a quadrant house system.
It took me a while to figure out what does the 10th house mean for me. I kind of come to the conclusion that I can use them, both the 11th house and the 10th house together.
The MC is kind of like your calling. My teacher, Kelly Surtees, well, I take classes from her. I don't know if she'll appreciate me saying she's my teacher, but I do take her classes. She actually does focus more on the MC because it's the angle, and then you blend in 10th house because it will import the 11th house issues into the 10th house. You do have to read them together.
Because I have Virgo on the 10th and then Libra on the 11th. It's kind of funny because Virgo's about service and Libra's about beauty, and I'm in the beauty industry, in the service industry.
Libra's about, health and the details that usually come before Libra, which is beauty. The 10th house represents your appearance. It affects your appearance a lot, the way that you look, not just your ascendant, obviously. It's like a blending of both.
It really is how people see you. I know a lot of people want to say it's your ascendant. I mean, you can see people's ascendant, but I really think that a lot of people's presentation does look like their MC.
Yeah, I agree with that because I'm a Capricorn Scorpio hybrid, and when people who don't know me that well but have spent a significant amount of time around me, they think I'm so nice. And it's not, I don't want to say like I'm this mean person, but I don't view myself as like the nicest person in the world. But a lot of people do view me as like the nicest person, and I'm like, you don't know me. Like, I'm so confused. And I'm like, that is my midheaven, because I don't feel like that's an authentic representation of who I am.
I heard that people view you as the midheaven until they really get to know you. Then they view you as the ascendant. But honestly, you're a Sagittarius rising with Jupiter there. So
yeah.
I'm the Libra midheaven, or like would make you super nice. Especially like on social media, people view you as your midheaven usually.
For me, I have Taurus on the midheaven and I have Saturn conjunct. I did always notice people think I'm in charge. Like, I do not, well, maybe I do have these control issues, but people, like my mom used to call me the general, especially in her later days when she had dementia, where all the truth and honesty comes out. I also noticed when I was younger, she used to crack me up even in the dementia, because she would just be so honest. And I know when I was younger, whenever I'd be in stores, people would like ask me directions or ask me where, not because they thought I worked there. I don't know. People would like think I know stuff, like I guess I walk around like I'm in charge, but that's also Leo rising, I think, as well.
You have Saturn in Taurus.
I have Saturn in Taurus.
I feel like you give off Saturn and Taurus vibes. So maybe it is the midheaven that people most see you as.
Yeah, I think it is.
I feel like
what
it
is
is.
Saturn and Taurus vibes?
like just very
you're in charge, but you're like chill at the same time.
Yeah. like the leader that you feel still comfortable like ask for help from.
Oh, okay.
Like
I can take that. That's
But,
right.
also,
just do it my way. You're chill. You're fine.
Yeah.
And it's funny because this should be like a feature episode. I mean, we're freaking Saturn sirens. Like, this is the Saturn house of the birth chart, the 10th house. You're a Capricorn, you're both Aquarians. I feel like we really embody this house a lot.
I don't really get my 10th house, though. I understand it the way I see my 10th house, but I have Saturn there, so there's a lot of delay. But like the stuff that I've been interested in, I can see Taurus for me in terms of the health, and plus Mercury and Capricorn in the 6th house. So I'm very interested in natural healing stuff.
Okay, you don't have to do anything to be your midheaven. Like,
Right.
Exactly.
It's natural.
Get confused. It's so natural, and it's like you just, it's like the ascendant. Also, I just made a video too for TikTok about the late bloomer career placements in astrology, like what would indicate that you find your career later in life. One of them was Saturn in the 10th house. I feel like you really find your career later on, or you go through a different career, like because Saturn delays.
I was pretty much in international big law firms working part-time, no kids, because I was like, I need lifestyle, so that's very Taurus.
Another thing about my 11th house is I have the asteroid Loving at the 29th degree in the 11th house. So like that gives off really nice person vibes, I feel like. I was just talking about my midheaven, basically, which is why I brought up.
I really feel like they're blended, and that's exactly how you have to look at it.
Yes.
I like reading charts with the MC in a different house. I think it's so interesting to try to put it together because there's so much more, so much richer. The eclipses, so like if you have your MC in the 9th or the 11th house, and then you've got, say, the eclipses coming along, you will still experience a lot of 10th, 4th house issues, a lot of career and things. And then even when the nodes move into your 10th house from the 11th house, you'll probably still deal with those issues, but
that's me right now.
A different aspect. It won't be probably quite as strong as when it was on your angles, because the angles power the whole thing up, but you'll still deal with that, but in a different way.
I think I know why. I think I know why. I just had an epiphany because Capricorn, the ruler of the 10th house, and Aquarius, the ruler of the 11th, both share Saturn as a ruler. I think that's why both of those houses flow together more so. It's more pronounced.
Yeah, you'll see it with the 9th house as well.
The rule of thumb is the midheaven in the 10th. You're here to be known for your achievements. 9th, here to learn and evolve spiritually and gain knowledge through experience. And the 11th, you're here to be like an influencer. So meaning you're meant to change the world in some way or leave some type of footprint that you're remembered for. So I prefer to when the midheaven is in the 9th or the 11th house. It doesn't happen that often, but it's pretty cool when you get a chart with that. I especially like the 9th house midheaven.
Yeah, me too.
I like it. Although, it will mean a lot of times, though, that their childhood might not have been so great.
Mine was good.
They had an unusual sort of childhood.
Mine wasn't usual, but it was good.
Yeah, like they were raised by siblings or extended family members sometimes.
We always talk about whole signs, and this was one of the reasons I do believe in whole signs, because when I first started out, I was using Placidus, and my mom didn't have any planets in her 10th house, and I'm like, except she had Lilith in there. She's a workaholic, so her life is her career. So I was like, that just doesn't make any sense to me. And then I changed it to whole signs, and she has a 10th house stellium. Her sun is a very late degree Cancer, so it's conjunct her Leo Mars. I can consider that a stellium because there's Mercury in Leo as well. She's got her sun very close to her 10th house.
Yeah, so it's a stellium that goes into the 11th house.
The 9th, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, both of the houses are so closely related. I feel like it's so hard to understand your parents, though, because we're we're just really biased, and we're not going to be objective in any way when it comes to our parents.
And there's a lot you don't know, too, about your parents.
My mom's big 3 is Cancer, Sun, Aquarius, Moon, Scorpio rising, but she's a Leo midheaven, and it shows.
Oh, yeah. I know a Scorpio rising who's like 29 degree Leo midheaven, and the hunger for attention is real.
Well, I don't want to say she likes attention, but she is in sales, and she does a wonderful job in doing that.
29 degree, though, which is like a Leo.
That's extra.
Anoretic. I'm a Capricorn stellium in my chart, so I love the 10th house. Gemini there, so I love my 10th house sign the most, I would say. Believe it or not, it took me so long to figure out I was meant to be in a career where I'm meant to talk. All of the careers that I had where I couldn't use my voice or my communication skills, I just completely hated them. I sabotaged them. It wasn't until I learned astrology that I realized, I'm meant to actually be heard and stuff. off because I have two angles ruled by Mercury, not one. So I feel like for Gemini midheavens, even more so. They have to talk, use their voice, writing, journalism, whatever it is. You're meant to share information. Like Scorpio midheavens do really well in psychology, criminology, other people's resources,
Management.
all the. It's funny too because Taurus midheavens, I see it a lot with like trophy wives or even models too. Taurus midheaven, but that's a nice one.
Two of my coworkers are Taurus midheavens in the beauty industry.
You also like you come off wealthy, even if you're not. You just
Classy.
No, that's the trouble. Can
Regal.
I have a little backup?
Hey, but I feel like it eventually will manifest for you just
I do
because
like nice things though, and I really take care of my things, but I think that's Virgo in the second house. My stuff lasts a long time, although they don't make it as good anymore. But I can keep things forever, and that's why I'm willing to spend more on things.
The Saturn Taurus loves like quality. They'll like invest in quality. They want their things to stand the test of time.
Having Chiron here is no joke.
Really, what's that like?
I am 28 going on 29 and I am finishing up my degree. I've talked about this multiple times. My career has been like I just completely, I blame it on the Sagittarius. I'm like jumping from this career to this career. It's okay to job hop, but like when you're completely going in different ways, like completely different fields, you tend to sabotage yourself. I have just been unable to like move forward in my career. I think that's because of Chiron.
Well, to be honest, Chase, if I can give a little Saturn in the 10th house conjunct MC advice.
Yes, yeah.
I mean, don't worry about that. You know what? Just follow it. Even with me, I probably needed Saturn on my MC to try to keep me stable as possible because of my moon. I've done that too. Having a fixed sign on your MC may not even have been any better. I've been a lawyer. I've had my own hoof trimming business. I've done all sorts of stuff. Follow it because that is what you're supposed to do. So don't worry. Maybe it doesn't look like, it's got to be steady yet. Maybe it will be that. So what you're doing now is collecting the skills.
Yeah, that's the way I look at it. Another thing is I had severe social anxiety and I just had a fear of being like perceived. And that's something you hear a lot on the internet, like don't perceive me. I had crippling, like paralyzing, physically paralyzing anxiety. I could not function. I do think that was due to
Virgo. That's totally Virgo.
Chiron in Virgo in the 10th house, the most visible house. You know what I mean?
I know from being a Virgo rising, that's how it manifests when you're young. Also, when you have a mercurial 10th house, you're going to be the jack of all trades. Like have a finger in every pie or whatever they say. You're probably going to have a lot of changes in your careers and you get bored, period. That's just how it is. When you have like Saturn there, like Pierre does, you just like accept it or whatever. But when you have Chiron there, you can feel ashamed of it, but you shouldn't because your career path is not like linear whatsoever with Mercury,
I grew up in church and everything, and I was at some church event or something, and they were talking about shame, and I had never heard like the definition of shame. I knew the word, but they were like talking about the definition of shame, and I don't even remember what they said, but I was just like, I feel that all the time. I've definitely improved, especially with medication. I'm a lot more confident now.
I think that's a good way to end this episode about the 10th house. I think we covered it in depth.
I do too.
All right, we're going to go talk about what's going on astrologically this week. So tune in on Sunday for that. And we'll see you guys next time for the 11th house.
Bye.
Bye.